Sally? Okay. It's a little after 5:15. We'll call this regular meeting to order. I'd like to recognize everybody in the audience tonight. Would you please stand and recite the pledge with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving on to school board norms. Jason, you want to read that since you got one there?
The board developed norms are to share and respect varied opinions and speak with a united voice once a decision has been reached, to prudently prioritize resources in a student-centric manner that aligns with the district's strategic plan, to exhibit a mindset of continuous improvement through adequate preparation for meetings and a commitment to board education, and to commit to assessing board effectiveness to ensure high-quality governance for the staff, students, and community of Jamestown.
Thanks, Jason. Nothing under public communications, conflicts of interest. Bob?
There's two areas I'd ask to be moved from the consent agenda to the regular agenda. First would be the payment of bills, and secondly would be I think
F1?
there's two open enrollment items that involve Pinker Buchanan schools, and I'd ask they both be moved to the regular agenda.
Okay. We will move those, if it's all right with the board, down to number 8 under other. So we'll have it'd be F4, the 4. F1 and 4. So there's 3 of them, correct, Bob?
I think so.
Yep. Okay, so F1 and 4 to other, and then the payment of bills, which is C in the consent agenda. And then also, if it's all right with the board, the review of the consolidated application got into the other on the consent agenda. We're going to move that down to number 8, other, or no, it's in finance, excuse me. It'll be C in finance. Okay, moving on, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda with those items moved out? Motion by Greg. Seconded by Jason. Any discussion? Hearing none, assuming roll call vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving into our regular meeting, we have recognition of Kimberly Carpenter. Somebody want to read that? Do they have it up? I apologize not asking earlier. Bob, you have it up?
It's coming. Okay.
Then Kim, if you want to come forward too, and
How much do you want me to read here?
I don't know how much is there.
Well, okay.
Maybe highlight.
Okay. This is a quote from Mrs. Carpenter: "Receiving recognition at the national level for following my passion is humbling. I'm extremely grateful for my family and colleagues who have mentored and encouraged me throughout my journey of teaching. This award recognizes my commitment to providing the best education I can for my students, and it is rewarding to know that I have an impact on their success. It's truly an honor to be a presidential awardee." And just some highlights on her career. Mrs. Carpenter has taught mathematics at Jamestown High School for the past 28 years, various courses, but includes teaching Algebra 1, Mathematical Thinking, Design Labs, MTSS Math Flex for grades 9 through 12. She has also served as adjunct professor at the University of Jamestown since 2013, teaching Secretary of Math, teaching methods, ideas of math, and intermediate algebra. She's been the department chair for, I'm sure, longer than she would care to admit, so we won't go into that. She's been a math leader in this district for a number of years. Kim's enthusiasm for mathematics and lifelong learning has helped her to develop a growth mindset within her students. She's always looking for new ideas and different strategies that will bring mathematics to life in her classroom. So, congratulations.
Just to add here too, just want a big thank you to Mrs. Carpenter for all she does, and just what a great honor for her, but for our district to have a presidential award winner for excellence in mathematics and in science teaching. Absolutely inspiring. Thank you so much for all that you do for Jamestown students, for our math department, and for all of us. You make us all better just by being who you are. So thank you for everything you do.
Moving on to letter B, correspondence. We have none. Reports, transition house and hub update. Adam?
All right. Mr. Conway hoped to be here as well, so I'm going to pull up his email just in case he doesn't make it. And then I'll start with the transition house. That's just a slippery deal there. That's all right. So Dr. Leck had asked me to come and provide some information on updating around the transition house. And ideally, that conversation would start with how we're able to facilitate that project. I think that most of you who were on the board previously were aware that our Jamestown North program transitioned from its location in a building because as we discussed with the staff there, and they had proposed that we felt like it was the right time to make more integration within the high school setting, and that it wasn't about an alternative building, it was about an alternative pathway for kids. And so as we made that change from a building to a program within our school that served as an alternative pathway for kids, there was a name change as well to what they're referred to now as the Learning Hub. So we talk about the Learning Hub, that's essentially what it is. I'm going to find that email here. As we thought about the transition program at the same time, we had a couple of referendums that the community said that wasn't the right plan at the right time. I think that we could agree on that. In both of those referendums, we had addressed the problem within the district, which was that the transition house was, where it's currently at, was inadequate for what that program could become and inadequate for what the program was now. And in fact, that program, if any of you have met any of the students or met any of the teachers, Dr. Luck refers to that program as the crown jewel of Jamestown Public Schools. What the transition program does essentially is help students develop independent living skills from the time that they have completed their high school requirements until they are at age 21. And that serves students that need more help with independent living skills, with recreation skills, with finding competitive employment after high school. And it's super important for those kids, and we actually serve lots of surrounding communities, kids that come through that program as well. So the 900 square foot space that they were working in was the best that we could do at that time. And then as we transitioned Jamestown North and that alternative program in the alternative building into the high school, we were able to create space to renovate. So that kind of vision for that really started last summer. And I know that we had some discussions on some renderings of a renovation at that time. So it was working with the teacher who's in charge of that program, Amy Bennett, and developing a vision for what that space could look like into the future for a transition house, and taking the Jamestown North building and renovating that to be that. So I think you guys have seen those plans previously, most of you. If not, I can definitely get what that renovation looks like to you. Then, let's take that plan and start meeting with local contractors and see, can we have some level of partnership on a project like this. And we found some local contractors that were willing to partner, and provided an estimate of what that would cost should we want to do everything in that plan in one big chunk. And at that point, the decision was made that we would just break that into smaller chunks and make it achievable, and then the district would act in the coordination of that to have some additional cost savings. So from what would be a $250,000 project, breaking that down to what can we achieve within our means and within the budget that we had set with that, and that was approved in January with the building projects. And so what that meant was that we do a lot of the coordination. Anytime you hire a general contractor, you can just cut them a check and say, here you go, let's go get this done. And there's a lot of decisions that are made, and things like getting the building permit, and things like coordinating with the other contractors and things. But we anticipated that this would be a great, authentic student project. And so with the construction trade from CTC supporting, and Bob Thorson with his experience, and Jerome Wagner with his extensive experience in the district, and a little bit of willingness and energy from Mr. Heinert and I, we've come together around this project. Amy Bennett has been a huge help in the detail kind of work, and also keeping us motivated and on track, and with her passion about that program, you can see that coming through. So last winter, we started, after the board approval, started with the demolition, which the CTC students thoroughly enjoyed. And then March hit, and when March hit, then that progress stopped because we couldn't have kids in person. But it didn't stop for very long, because it wasn't long after that that our custodians started to champion that, with Fran Silbernagel, and also newly hired Josh McLean at that time. And those two have done a phenomenal job, everything from putting up studs and walls and sheetrock, the things that we can do to code at our level, and then other things had to be contracted out, plumbing, electrical work, to be done to code with that. So over the summer, we've done quite a bit with that renovation. Like anybody else who's done any renovation projects, you run into hiccups, you problem solve them, you get delays in products because of COVID. All of those things are things that we've experienced throughout the summer. And but we are ready for our transition house to move in. They don't have their kitchen yet because the countertops won't be in until mid-September. They don't have the windows that we envision putting in because those won't be in until later in the year. But CTC will be able to then install those products, and we'll have that additional savings on the project too. So a really cool collaboration. I've learned a lot about coordinating and contracts and building projects and code at the public level. And so it's been a great learning experience for all of us involved. It's been a labor of love and additional duty for a lot of people, but definitely something that we're proud of, that progress, and would love to host a board meeting up there this fall once we get closer to completion, so you guys can get some eyes on that as well. At this time, I take any questions on transition house while I still try to find John's email here for.
John's here now,
Oh,
so.
he is, okay. All right, perfect timing, okay.
Any questions for Adam on transition house, or Heidi?
Yeah, I'd like the idea of, scheduling a tour maybe before a board meeting, or having a board meeting there, depending on the logistics of space.
Yep. Yeah, and if we can't make it happen, we could certainly do a virtual grand opening or something creative as well. Okay,
Any other questions? No?
thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm John Conway, the coordinator of Jamestown Hub, formerly Jamestown North. Hub does not have any acronym, or it's not, doesn't mean anything but the hub. So if anybody's wondering what it stands for, it's just the hub. So we decided when we did move over from the old building to the high school that North wasn't appropriate anymore, so that's why we changed it. Jamestown Hub, a couple springs ago, we had talked about possibly moving all classes over to the high school because we were currently having one of our courses over at the high school. So kids were coming over to the high school to take social studies and other classes, and we had kind of floated the idea of getting the other two teachers over. A couple different reasons. When we used to have 3 teachers in the building, it was a little easier for security reasons, supervision, that kind of stuff. When we were down to 2 teachers, it was a little tricky. Normally, if there was a teacher that was gone, I didn't have to get a sub in. I would just cover with the other 2 teachers. And then when I had 2 teachers over there, again, it was kind of, with different things going on, we just felt it wasn't as safe as it needed to be. Plus, we were finding out that the kids that were coming over to the high school, they felt pretty comfortable. I did a survey just to kind of feel the kids out, and we had about 23 kids that I surveyed at that time and just asked them, why are you going to the alternative setting? Is it because of the building, or is it because of the programming? And all but 2 people said because it is the programming. I had 2 kids with severe anxiety issues that really had a tough time to come back to the high school. They did do it, and we did have one that graduated, one that went on and got the GED. But they said the programming. So once they knew that, then we made a decision that would be a good reason to move it over to the high school. So last year, normally we graduate anywhere from 8 to 13. Last year we had 6 because we had a lot of underclassmen. So we had 22 kids that were still signed up to continue on. I've got a couple more kids that asked to go to the hub just in this past 2 days. So we're probably starting out with 24. The other thing about having the hub over at the high school is we're utilizing the hub teachers for picking up classes that where a kid maybe failed a semester, or maybe having some difficulty with staying up in a certain class. We move them over to the hub. And we tried doing that. We were doing that before we moved over, but it's a lot easier now being in the same building. So we did have 53 or 55 students that were in the regular high school setting that we utilized hub teachers. So I guess that's all I have for information. Any questions?
Any questions from Greg, then Jason?
I was wondering, did you say how many teachers that you had in that program?
We have 3. Yeah.
Jason?
And to piggyback off that, are they able to serve the additional students who are sent their way? Has that become an issue? Do they feel overwhelmed? Are we adequately staffed there?
Well, again, last year was the first year that we did a lot of math. And with what we've learned is that we've got to look at the time of the semester when we put the kids into the courses. So we've got kind of guidelines now as far as when we get those kids in. But other than that, no, it's always overwhelming to start of the year because it's just like anybody else. You get all these kids and then they're having different subjects. But as within a couple days or a few days, then it kind of sifts out a little bit, and some kids decide that the hub isn't the route to go, and so then we get down to more manageable numbers. So.
Got a follow-up, Jason?
Yep, and for students who may experience anxiety, the building thing, are there any kind of accommodations in place for that? Is that a case-by-case basis?
Well, we utilize the academic support room. which is a room right across from the counseling room. We also, within the 3 rooms that we have upstairs for a hub, we put in, there was an old supply room that was a large enough room that we had cleaned that out, put a door in from one of the rooms, and we made that into kind of a room where a person could go into. We could get 2 students in there comfortably. And then it's a door with a window so that the teacher can see them. So,
Bob?
Is it the method of delivery, is it still primarily independent study?
it's still independent study. We also use Edgenuity. Yeah, okay. So we utilize that. It is 3 courses that we try to limit the students to, and it's a block system. Okay.
Any other questions for John, or? None? Okay, thanks for the report.
Thank you.
Moving on to number 2, superintendent's report. Rob?
Thank you. You have my written report. I'll touch on some areas, and others are action items for you later. And so I might provide a little bit of foundation information. The first is the distance learning plan. That's something that you will be asked to approve or recommended to approve later on in this meeting. Just a point of reference, this distance learning plan was, or at least the foundation of it, was previously approved by the Department of Public Instruction and the Governor's Office for our distance learning plan in March of last year or April of last year. We did updates just to make sure that it matched currently changing things like what we're doing with Schoology versus multiple platforms, things like that. But this was essentially the plan that had been approved at the state level previously. We did send that out to our reentry planning committee. We had some feedback and made some minor changes based on what the reentry planning committee looked at for that plan. The transition house, maybe to add on to what Mr. Gaylor was talking about, it really is a jewel for our community. I think we're so fortunate to have a program like the transition house to support the needs of our students. And it is also accurate, as Mr. Gaylor has said, that that space just wasn't matching what we really needed it to be. It is a residence, and it was made to work. It does not work anymore. And we needed to make a change to move forward, and I have been very appreciative of the work that Mr. Gaylor, Mr. Heinert, Mr. Thorson, all of the staff have done, taking what could have been a very large, expensive project and making that much more manageable with a dedication and commitment to a project. They've done fantastic work, and I'm really excited for that program to be in that space. Such an upgrade. But that lends us to the next question, though, of what do we do with that building. As it currently stands, as you're aware, it's on the Lincoln Elementary campus. If you've been around Lincoln Elementary during recess time or at the beginning of the day, they could use a little extra space. And I think Mrs. Schmidt would tell you, boy, we could really use that little extra footprint. What we would like to see, if the board's agreeable to this, what I would like to do is to move forward and put that residence out. We would like to see that home sold and moved off the campus of Lincoln. And if that's an option rather than raising the building, I think that would certainly be more cost effective and probably better long term. And then we could expand the playground on that campus to accommodate the additional space. So unless there's concerns about that process, that's how we would like to move forward with the old transition house. Later on in the agenda, you will be asked to act on some requests for extended leave / release from contracts. So I want to make sure that everybody's just clear on policy and what those requests are. Originally, there was, and I just want to clarify, originally there was a request from Mrs. Vanessa Edwards to have she made 2 requests. The first was to be a request for extended leave, and I'll talk about the leaves and how those are, what they are in just a second. And then if that was not approved, then a release from contract. So that's Mrs. Edwards. Later this weekend, I had another request from Rachel Schroeder to do that same thing. So you might have, depending on when you looked at your agenda, that might have only said release from contract request, and that has since been updated to recognize her request is actually now the same. First, consideration from the board for a extended leave, then if that's not approved, then a release from contract, okay? The last is Ms. Sarah Robinson. She was approved on May 18th and has request by letter to resign the position, to be released from contract. So just to touch on those, the background of those, if you open up policy DDDB, that's the associated policy. And I want to clarify because this can be a little bit confusing. There's two leaves listed in here. What you're the most familiar with as a board is acting on the second of the two. That is the regular leave of absence. That's also represented in our negotiated agreement. And that's done 6 months prior to the leave itself starting. So that is not what is being requested here. That would have already happened in February. Okay? What's being requested here is an extended leave. So just to read that policy, extended leave beyond what has been accrued or is mandated by law requires prior board approval. The board will consider each written request on a case-by-case basis. So that written request has occurred, and now the request comes to the board. Generally speaking, as I wrote in my report, at least in the updated report, generally speaking, now I lost my presentation. We see annual leaves of absence traditionally in the second of the two. That's generally speaking, extended leaves have been shorter durations. It hasn't been a full year, generally speaking. I'm not aware of any that have been. I'm sure over the course of time there may have been. It certainly hasn't been the case since I've been here that an extended leave has been for the duration. The other important note for that, outside of just the time frame of the proximity to the school year, is that this approving an extended leave for the duration of the year, the other caveat that you need to recognize is that comes then with continuing contract rights. You would turn that into the same thing as the regular leave of absence. That would be continuing contract rights after this extended leave has occurred. So if you look at options that the board would have, and I can review these again if you desire when we get to this point in the agenda, but when you consider those staff that have requested first to be considered for extended leave, and those, and then if that's not approved, then a request for release, you'd have three options. The first is deny the leave, or deny the request, and then you're essentially saying we're expecting those contractual obligations to be fulfilled. You signed your contract, you should fulfill it. You would have the option to approve the leave of absence, at which point the district would fill that position, either hiring from within, restructuring staff, hiring externally, or we would leave the positions open until a position is found to fill those spots or spot. Or third, you would approve approve the release of contract, not the extended leave request. You would approve the release of contract. You'd fill those positions again appropriately, and then allow those, ensure that those individuals are aware that they are encouraged and welcome to apply for open positions when it is deemed appropriate for them to do so. So those are, and again, we can spend more time talking about that, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of primer in my report for the policy side of that. We've also had a request for a resignation and a release from contract from Pam Brown. This is different. This is a request to resign at the end of the calendar year. And I gave a little bit of background information for this as well. Mrs. Brown's position, seems like in the last couple of months we've dealt with a number of CAS-connected staff, so I don't think I need to go back over what CAS is, but when we absorbed those CAS staff, and Mrs. Brown is one of the few remaining cast staff. And this position, because it was hired at on their salary schedule, we assumed that salary. We continued, we placed her in a new position in the technology department. She has served the district well in those areas. We will certainly miss all of the leadership that she provides, the work that she does from a communications, webmaster standpoint, social media presence. She does a fantastic job. She's implemented our school district app, made many, many improvements, including, as I'm sure a lot of board remember, the ADA compliance issues with our website. So she's done outstanding work. Her request is to resign at the end of the calendar year. Based on her salary and what we would choose to do, we can actually enhance the technology department because, again, we absorbed this salary and continuing contract. We believe that, and I'm working with Mr. Armitage, we decided that we could bring on a half-time person to be called a communications director that would have a number of Mrs. Brown's current responsibilities, but we could also then, with that same budget footprint, hire a full-time person in a non-certified position with a salary of $37,500. So in reality, we're bringing 1.5 people. We're losing one, but bringing back 1.5. Some of that speaks to the work that Mrs. Brown does, because she is, at least it feels like sometimes she's more than one person. But I think it also recognizes in her salary footprint is about $118,000, and we could fill that spot with a half-time position and in a full-time non-certified position, and essentially save a little bit of money or be very close to the same. So I think that's a good plan. Overall, when the time comes for this, we'll have updated job descriptions because you'll have to post a new job. We don't have that job. And so as a board, you need to post those jobs. And so that's something that we're working on. From my perspective, that's certainly something we can manage and make work. But the request for her to resign is something that you have to act upon tonight. We would be looking at making those job descriptions, and we wouldn't be posting a position until much closer to the actual retirement date. And so we'd be organizing what those new job descriptions are. And before we post, that would be something we would ask of the board. Extended contracts, you might wonder, for those that have been in this meeting in the past, usually we have extended contracts based on what we might need to do with some of the staffing requests that are up before you. We may need to address those extended contracts. So we opted to hold off on the approval of those extended contracts until that time comes, until our next meeting, because then we'll know for certain what all of those extended contracts are. When we met last week, one of the questions we had related to the instructional plan review. What I feel makes the most sense is we include that as part of this report. I'll put that, if you scroll down to the bottom of my report, in additional documents information, I will list our current phase, which we know is green, our current instructional plan, which is 2, and then the week in which our instructional plan review team will meet again. So we're doing that every 2 weeks. Right now, the week of August 31st through the September 4th, our team will meet again, and I'll just continue to update this section of my report to communicate what our current plans are. So again, we're continuing to meet. We have a team that's going to continue to look at what our current environment is and move forward with any instructional plan changes that are necessary based on the environment and what's happening in our district, in our school buildings, and in Stutzman County. Just to share a few really exciting opportunities with University of Jamestown. We spent a lot of time in the last couple of meetings talking about a shared facility, which of course is exciting. I've included a site plan and a floor plan for that. But I want to spend more time talking about 2 other opportunities for partnership with the University of Jamestown that have come up. Mrs. Heidi Deckert is going to be teaching an introduction to teaching class for JHS students, so that'll be a dual credit opportunity for our students. I think it's a great platform to promote what's clearly a need in our profession for teachers. It also provides a dual credit opportunity. There aren't many programs like this. I think it's exciting to be on the forefront of that. I thank Mr. Gaylor, Mrs. Eckert for the work in getting something like this planned, but also to Paul Olson at the University of Jamestown for being willing to be that partner with us. I think it's a great opportunity for kids. I think it's a great opportunity for the school district and a great opportunity for our profession. So I just wanted to share what I think is really good news. The second, or the third, I guess, partnership that I wanted to share, I've talked a lot in the last couple of years about the Teacher Leadership Academy. That was a partnership through North Dakota State University. They were the only they're the only institution of higher ed that had this kind of Teacher Leadership Academy. We have been in that. Our graduates are coming. Actually, they'll come before the board in the next couple of months and share their action research projects, which I think are really exciting. But we've had a chance to experience what that Teacher Leadership Academy is and learn from North Dakota State University and their experience. I reached out to Dr. Peterson and Dr. Olson about what would the possibility be for the University of Jamestown to be our host institution. And they were very, very interested, and we are moving forward with planning. So our next Teacher Leadership Academy will be a venture between Jamestown Public Schools and the University of Jamestown, which I think is great for us. I think it's great for UJ. I think it's a program that can build and grow and impact even more school districts across our area. And I think it's a win-win for everybody. And I think it's something I was very thankful to the University of Jamestown that they're interested in as well. So I think that's great news. I wanted to recognize Mr. Gaylor, Mr. Heinert. I tell you, it seems like every couple of weeks we'll get a message down in central office that says, you know, I think we can do something different. I think we can get a higher reimbursement rate for this. You know, I'm spending some time on the budget, and I think we can do better. I think we can do this. Hey, if we reach out to other school districts and we advertised a little bit differently, or if we provided more opportunities, we could grow the CTC partnerships from 3 schools to 6 schools. And they've got great innovative ideas, and I just want to recognize the work that they're doing. They're doing really a nice job recognizing that the CTC isn't just about Jamestown Public. There's rural partners that we need to consider as well. And we don't get that higher reimbursement rate as a school district, the unit, without rural partners. And we want to maintain and ensure that every rural school district in our area has opportunities and access to a career and tech center. So a lot of great work is happening there, and just want to recognize all the work that they're doing. And I know that they're working with 2 school districts that might be interested in joining in the near future. So I think that's really a pretty exciting thing as well. I added some information this morning, or updated this morning, and at our noon deadline, it had already increased from there. But we actually have 153 requests for the Jamestown Virtual Academy as of close. So what we're going to be doing is reaching out in this week to all of those families. We want to make sure that they understand clearly what the Virtual Academy is and what it isn't. I think there's maybe some, if you look on the Arizona State Prep Digital website, there might be a misunderstanding about what the program is. It is not a program that Arizona State meets with students on a daily basis. It is the curriculum to provide. Now, schools across the country are using Arizona State and Prep Digital. It is a vetted curriculum, a solid, robust curriculum for an online platform. But that's what it is. It is not a teacher. And the district provides progress monitoring and provides a little bit of support. The district is not providing instruction. We're providing curriculum. We want to make sure before we register people, and they are committed to the program, that they understand This is the curriculum that will be used. It will be very similar, although more robust. The expectations will be higher, but it will be closer to what we did in the spring. And that it is a curriculum that families will use to educate. And we just want to make sure before people make that semester-long commitment, but that they understand exactly what it is and what it isn't. And so if at any time, but until we register with Arizona State, until we pay a bill, we certainly will encourage families, if it's not the right choice for them, to come into the traditional, back into the traditional classroom setting. But once we make that commitment financially with Arizona State, that's when families are locked in. So we just want to make extra sure that everybody that is signing up knows exactly what they're getting and that we are all on the same page, because we do want to make sure, because it is a commitment, that we're doing that the right way. So that is what I had for my written report. I would stand for questions if the board has any.
Any questions? Gail? Your mic?
What is the distribution of students? Is it more elementary or is it across the board? Were there concerns, any of them mentioned? Was it because, is there any other data that we have with that and why people have chosen that as their option?
We had 62 elementary, and then the rest are in secondary. We didn't get specific feedback from every family in terms of the rationale for why the choice, but anecdotally from those that I've talked to, it's mostly health, concerns for health, those types of within the health range, or just concerns about process and procedures, things like that. But like I said, we really just need to make sure that everybody knows exactly what the Prep Digital program is. Districts across the country do it differently. Some provide some level of instruction. What I'm afraid has happened is some look at the Arizona State website and they look at Prep Digital, and what they're seeing is Arizona State's online school for students in Arizona. And that's about $12,000 a student. And that is, every kid gets to get, there's 25 in a class, and they meet with their student, they meet teacher to student online from this time to this time, and it's a very outlined schedule. That's not what this is. It is the curriculum they use, but it is not the Arizona State online school. It is the curriculum that we're making available. And so we just need to make sure that families understand that, so we'll make personal phone calls to those 153.
Melissa?
First of all, I just want to say thank you for clarifying that, because I even misunderstood. I was thinking that there was actually going to be some teaching that went along with that, and thank you for having principals reach out to those families. Will that call be this week, you said? And then what's the new deadline then for making the decision on that?
Well, we would make those phone calls this week, and then so between that phone call and the time it would take us to organize those, those uploads to get the correct information, I think most families are going to know if this is something that they're choosing. Again, we just have to make sure that everybody understands the variables that we're really talking about. And so we don't want somebody to get into a program and say, well, I thought it was going to be this, and would have made a different choice, and they made a commitment to a semester. One of the things that we learned from Arizona State this morning in a conference call was that they're really backlogged. As you can imagine, their curriculum is awfully popular right now. It's probably, if not the most popular curriculum, I would say in the country. They're doing a lot of business. So the time it takes to get everybody registered is a little bit longer. It used to be a turnaround of 2 to 3 days, and now it's 2 weeks. So, we've kind of set a deadline of we're going to, as soon as possible, we want our students to get started. But at the very least, they would start after Labor Day. But it's a self-paced curriculum, but that's one of those things we can't control. We can't control how fast that gets, those registrations happen and get out to families.
Jason?
With 150-some registrations, do you see any impacts on class sizes in the district, either at elementary or secondary level? With social distancing, the space being important, are there any opportunities there?
That's a good question. What you really see is in some buildings like Louis L'Amour, there was one, just one. In other schools, I think in Roosevelt, there's 21. So it looks different. Of course, there's a multi-section building versus a single-section building, but there's, and even across the grade levels, it's different. For fourth grade, we see 15. I think it's second grade or third grade, we saw 4. So not a huge impact in third grade. But yeah, I think anything that lessens the class size fits into what we're trying to do from a physically distancing standpoint. But nothing across the board that really shocks you and say, we're not going from 20 in a classroom to 6. It's more just a couple kids different in certain grade levels.
Any other questions for Rob? None? Okay. Moving on to board education, we have educational competency, Families First, Coronavirus Relief Act impact to human services. Sally?
We thought it'd be important to educate the board on the impact of the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, FFCRA, or they call it the Act, several different things. So just to give you an overview of the Act and some of the, impact or how we are, how we have educated staff and where they can file for this. I have a PowerPoint up. I'm not going to go through it slide by slide. Last week, Dr. Leck and I did a Zoom meeting with staff. We had about 60 participants that listened to the presentation, educating them on this so they understand what leaves are available to them. And it's also recorded and on our website. So that was a great opportunity for them to learn about it. The act went into obviously with COVID, and it's related to COVID leaves, and went into effect in March and ends December 31st. And what it's for, it allows anything with situations with COVID, it gives employees 10 days for a full-time person, that's 80 hours of sick leave, not from their bank. It's, by federal law that we have to give employees this opportunity. Okay. So if it is applicable, we recommended to the staff to apply for this. And we have created a document on the website that employees, if they want this, they apply on a document that we have created, and they were educated during this slide presentation, where to go. So what the law provides is if, you're subject to quarantine, or you've been advised by a healthcare provider, or if you're having COVID symptoms, you can apply for this leave. The Department of Health has told us, I'm told I have to quarantine. The Department of Health will tell you that. You could tell that person when you call that, I was exposed to COVID-19. They will email that employee a letter that states on this date, you are to not work from August 15th, and 14 days later, the letter will state you may return to work on this date. They email that to Michelle or myself, and then we go and they file for the correct documentation, on our website, and we look at that and process it. If we get the medical documentation and evaluate if it qualifies, then we, pay that person out of this, out of this leave. The other three, number 4, 5, and 6 on the slide are for caring someone that has COVID, or if a child care place closes or your child care provider is unavailable, or if school closes, this leave applies for that. And number 6, I'm not sure, it's some other, it's specified by the U.S. Department of Health, some other disease. So I think they threw that in there in case some other situation came up. But, 4 and 5, number 5 for the child care, 4 and 5 are at 2/3 pay, 67% for 4 and 6. There's also a daily limit, and you could $200 per day and $2,000 for the total of the 10 days. So those are 10 days. Now, if a child care or school closes, what they did in the act is they have an expanded FMLA. So you can also file for 2/3 pay for an additional 10 weeks. If that, for the number of hours that you work or scheduled to work as part-time, then it would be prorated based on that. But that's kind of, the act in a nutshell. We also, and I'm not going to go through, we spent half hour, 45 minutes. I won't give you every single slide in all the details. But what we did do is educate staff on what they need to do, and that they, this act is there. So if they need to use it to apply for it, we recommended them to apply for it first. And the information is out there. And so they know that, and during the presentation, obviously, Dr. Leck threw Michelle's and my name. If you have any questions, they were directed to us, and we're happy to help answer any questions about it. We also went through these slides, and we had several slides on what if my child is sick? What if I have medical conditions that limit me from returning to work? So we went through, either the Department of Health. You would have documentation from them, or if you're seeing a medical provider, you would get medical documentation from them. So we just kind of thought of questions and went through those and what the process was on, following JPS's protocol to access that particular leave. And we also clarified that besides COVID, you may just get sick. So all the other situations, policies, federal regulations are, still in effect. Maybe I get pneumonia, it has nothing to do with COVID, and I have to be out 2 or 3 weeks. Well, that falls under the traditional FMLA, where I'm sick and I can't do my job. Then I apply for my sick leave and I just go that route. It's not, this is just in addition to a separate situation just for COVID. We went through and explained all of that, and but the recording of what we talked about is out there, and all the documents that they need. We also have a form if they, had a situation, underlying medical conditions, they're not really sick, they can complete, a questionnaire with their doctor. And Dr. Lex and the district's goal is to keep everybody safe and healthy. So if somebody needs a protective screen, or maybe some things that keep people away 6 feet. We want to keep everybody safe and healthy and working. So we just really stress that to them, that our goal is, to help in any way we can. But we answered, we asked several questions and what the process was. So I don't think I'll go on and on. If you have more questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Gail?
Oh, sorry, Gail. You can go now.
So if, say, an employee is sick and they're in that, after that 10-day period and they're now in that 10-week period, if they run out of sick leave, are they still eligible to use the sick leave bank?
The sick leave bank, Gail, that is, in the master agreement and in policy, they would have to apply for it and give the committee medical information, and then the committee would make that determination. If you're still sick after the 10 days and have sick leave, obviously you can use your sick leave and have the medical certification. and be out on, FMLA. You can also use your own sick leave, and get 100% paid if you so choose.
Rob?
I was just going to make a quick comment that, with this, really the purpose behind this presentation, at least the genesis of why we felt we needed to, this was one of the comments that came through loud and clear in our staff survey. What do I do with leave? And that's where this idea of this presentation came from. Number one, we wanted to make sure people understood what their rights were in terms of the FFCRA leave. We wanted to be sure that everybody was crystal clear and heard the same information about what leaves are available. But we also saw the need to have these hypothetical situations. Like Sally said, she's not going through every one of them, but you can screen through. You have the same presentation. And it's just a bunch of hypotheticals. If this happens, then this. At least gives people a chance to get a frame of reference around this leave. And the other thing that we talked about that I think is important too, and Sally did mention this, but I just want to reaffirm it, that we really are asking people to take that FFCRA leave first. That exhausts at the end of the calendar year. And so if somebody were to choose to take their sick leave, their district sick leave, and then run out of sick leave, FFCRA is not going to be there. So we want people, and we've encouraged people, and we'll continue to encourage people that if it's applicable, that they would take that FFCRA leave, because that will exhaust. Now, that doesn't come from a bank of federal funds. We just have to absorb that, but it's the circumstances we live in right now, and we think it's important, and we just wanted to continue to reinforce that leave we want people to be thinking about taking first, because it's eligible and it's short term. But those are just the add-ons I wanted to throw in.
Diane?
This subject begs the question if Mr. Heglin has assembled his current sub-list for the fall, and is it down this year?
This is a good question. I think we've tried to tackle this one before, but we did a survey, and about 33%, about a third of our substitutes that responded, said they were uncertain if they wanted to sub again. The ESPB is looking at what they might be able to do from a licensing standpoint to lessen the burden, to make more substitutes available. How could they do that? What rules and regulations could they loosen in a time of need to get subs? Subs are going to be hard. That's really going to be a hard thing. It was hard before, and it didn't get easier. When you cut out a third of your potential subs, it doesn't get easier. We're just going to have to cross that bridge when we come to it to find out what we're really dealing with. And one thing we have talked about from a quarantine standpoint, if a class, say, for example, a class is quarantined, not necessarily, boy, we have, 15 kids that tested positive. We're just talking about quarantine. And if they're in quarantine and the staff is asymptomatic and they can teach virtually to that class, well, they don't need to take leave. They would be eligible they're working. And that's an option in that kind of circumstance. Now, could a person in that situation choose to take FFCRA leave and be paid? Yeah, they could. They might run out of leave. What happens if quarantine happens again and you are symptomatic? And what happens then? And so we want to just encourage people, if they can work, that they'll work. And we'll do the same thing with support staff. If they can work, and if we can put them in a position in a quarantine that we can get that work or some level of work, commensurate level of work from them, we would prefer to do that. And not all positions translate. If I'm a custodian in an elementary building, I can't do that from home. But what can we do? What do we have a need to have done? We don't want to be in a situation where we have people with extended leaves that are in unpaid situations. We'll do whatever we can to make sure that doesn't happen, but we can't control everything. But that's our intent for sure.
Gail?
With what we said in those limitations, are we doing everything that we possibly can to mitigate those risks? I've had some concerns expressed to me that Some schools aren't taking the 6 feet and the distancing as seriously. Are we having people wear masks at those meetings? Are we doing all the things that we can to keep us open fully as long as we can with those things in mind? I've heard those concerns from parents and things. Are we implementing those with absolute fidelity and modeling those things with absolute fidelity? I think that's going to be one of our keys to keeping this working and working longer and not getting lax. Like, it's so much fun when we meet closer together because we're craving that, but still we can't do that right now. You know?
Well, I think just like anything new, you have, there's periods of adjustment. But I can tell you our guidelines are clear. And if we have to pivot along the way and reinforce what our expectations are, we will certainly do that. But, you know, I think that's a little bit of a learning process, but we'll definitely, I know what our expectations are. And just like anything else, when you have expectations and you follow through with those, most people follow along with what those guidelines are. But if we have to kind of refocus, we certainly will do that because that's what our expectation is.
Jason? And then Melissa?
And Sal, you may have mentioned this, but, and this might be getting in the weeds a little bit, but in order to qualify for this Family First leave, do you have to test positive for COVID?
No.
Back to those 6. Sally, go back to those 6 areas.
So you can see it, you have to be subject to a quarantine, so you don't have to have COVID symptoms or being tested for COVID. But you have to have the department, if you're quarantined, which means you've been exposed to COVID, we're not going to determine that. The Department of Health will determine that so that they can trace it. So you don't have to have COVID or symptoms of COVID by the act. You know, you have to be subject to a quarantine. So-
one of these 6 areas.
Melissa?
Going back to the substitute list, just wondering in the interest of preventing cross-contamination, for lack of a better word, have we thought about having substitutes that are only assigned to certain buildings so that you don't have somebody going into Gessner School one day and then the next day they're over at Roosevelt and they find out that Gessner has had an outbreak and now they brought it over to Roosevelt? Is that something that has been thought of or even feasible?
I think it's a great idea, but I don't know if we have enough subs to be able to. I think we'll struggle with subs no matter where they're located. But I think there's, anything we can do to limit is great, but it has to be, like you said, it has to be a feasible thing too.
Okay. Any other questions on the Relief Act, or none? Okay.
Maybe just another comment, if there's those out in the public that say substitute teaching is for me, give Joe Hageland a call, and we will see what you need to do to move forward with that. University of Jamestown students, have an opportunity for them as students, which is a laxing of the substitute teaching regulations in the last few years. If you are a student and you're going into education, it is a great opportunity to get a little bit of practice in front of the classroom. So those in the community that have interest in that, or those that are University of Jamestown students, just give us a call, and we would certainly point you in the right direction.
Okay. Moving on. Oh, go ahead, Sally.
So today, there was an employee that actually emailed me, and they were unable to attend Dr. Lex and my presentation. So I was able just to send the link, and we have a link on the website that has the forms they need to complete, this presentation, and the video recording of what Dr. Lex and I presented. So they have all the information so they can make an informed decision.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to old business. Any old business? Hearing none, moving into new business under activities. Can I have a motion to approve the Jamestown Park and Rec 2021 Wilson and Eagles Arena Agreement in the amount of $29,000? Moved by Bob, seconded by Melissa. Any discussion? Heidi?
Sally, is this an increase from last year's request?
It increases $250 every year.
Aaron, did you have a question?
Yeah, it was along the same lines. It just,
Okay.
with that, is that in line with the budget for this year?
Yes.
Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving into building and grounds, we have nothing. Curriculum and assessment, is there a motion to approve the Jamestown Public School Distant Learning Plan? Motion by Heidi, seconded by Greg. Any discussion? Aaron?
Yeah, just a comment to it, read through it, and I just noticed that the learning plans 2 and 3 with the hybrid models aren't addressed within there. Could you just comment to that briefly?
That the instructional plans aren't listed in there?
The hybrid learning plans for distance learning aren't referenced in there.
We didn't take the time to, we certainly could add them. We didn't take the time to specifically outline them because we did that in the health and safety plan. We just referenced the health and safety plan. But we could add those into we could add what that looks like at each of those levels if that would be sufficient. With this distance learning plan, a lot of this would be enacted if we went into 4, which is distance learning. But we could make that change if that were the wishes of the board. It would be copy and paste. But it is addressed in the health and safety plan. But
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving into letter B, 6 through 12, grade 1 and one-on-one instruction. Adam and Ryan and Mike.
So Mike and I will share the podium here, but we'll just kind of build off of each other. I think I'll probably talk about maybe the backdrop for our one-to-one initiative and that process, and then Mike has all the technical expertise on how we're actually making this happen. So last year, throughout the year, we had a committee that engaged in some site visits at schools around the state, gathered information from other school districts within the state as well as out of the state on learning management systems. And our goal was to implement a learning management system and do a selection process. Dr. Leck talked about the Teacher Leadership Academy before, and the Teacher Leadership Academy had a couple of teacher leaders that were involved in leading that process and organizing how we would refine and determine what we needed for a learning management system. And then, of course, again, March changed everything, and you guys received that recommendation for a learning management system. Maybe it was the first meeting in March, and so that recommendation was made to select Schoology. In the process about doing those site visits and talking with schools, we knew that moving towards a one-to-one environment was in the strategic plan. It was in the long-range planning for the district, and we had already begun that process of one-to-one planning. And so the recommendation from that group, for those of you who were at the board meeting that night might recall, that their recommendation was that then a separate task force would be formed to look at one-to-one implementation and specifically device selection in one-to-one implementation based on what we had learned from other schools and what successes they were having with their learning management system combined with one device to one student. So, of course, the spring changed everything. We learned a lot about distance learning. We learned a lot about distribution of devices to students and student care within that. And so that task force had made that recommendation. And then this summer, we determined that we would be able to, and the plan was always to go with 11th and 12th grade would be one-to-one this fall. Mike was able to look at the district footprint and find the right amount of devices for us to go 9, 12, and then we started to look at the number of devices 6, 12, and developed a proposal that we sat down and discussed administratively to do a pilot of iPads, which is one of the devices that that Learning Management Task Force had looked at and said this needs to be on our list for potential device selection, to do a pilot of iPads at the 6th grade level, and then go 7th through 12th grade with Chromebooks. And the reasons those devices, it was kind of what we had in place already for the high school, and to have a consistent device is super important, so that if a teacher assigns something, they know that all students are going to have access to that material, no matter whether they're at home on their home computer and they don't have the latest version of Adobe, or they're at school. We also feel like kids care for their devices more if they're their own personal ones, and then the obvious important thing of limiting sharing of devices between students in times like this, when we don't want, one cart of laptops to be touched by dozens of students and congregating before and starting class. Rather, students will come into class, they don't need to log into a new device and wait 5 minutes for it to start up and not get connected to their C account. We're just click and go. So the goal with our one-to-one initiative this fall is to roll that out. And Mike was able to, again, find those devices and shuffle things and adjust things within their planning process to make that happen. So we are super excited about that. Along with that goes the professional learning that we'll integrate throughout the year on the SAMR model. So the SAMR model is basically moving from, okay, I'm substituting what I used to do and putting it into technology, into higher level augmentation of what we do in the classroom, and moving beyond to a more higher level and creative thinking process with the types of assignments that we're able to do within a one-to-one environment. So we brought that proposal. Mike was able to make it work. He can talk about how he was able to make that work. And we're excited to be able to start the school year that way. We know that as we implement that pilot project, we know that that will spur some conversation and some learning. And then as the semester progresses, we'll reconvene that task force to start looking at a device selection process with some information about what we've experienced and the pros and cons of those devices as we move forward. So I'll let Mike talk a little bit about how he was able to make that happen and long-range stuff.
Can we also at some point too talk about self-insurance?
Oh.
We talked about that as well.
Okay. So one of the things that we discovered in that process of learning about learning management systems was the idea of districts creating a self-insurance pool. And essentially what that does is covers accidental damage. If students have accidental damage to their device, or something breaks or malfunctions, then we self-insure that and use those funds for that. And so we had proposed as part of our proposal, starting with a $30 and then on a sliding scale for reduced price $20 and $10 for free lunch students to be able to purchase self-insurance or purchase insurance through the district. And then that would serve to be able to, look at the amount of breakages that we traditionally have and estimate what the breakage could be, so we can replace devices for students so that there's no learning time missed. And then, of course, families take that burden of risk off with, my 11-year-old is carrying a device around, or my, 17-year-old, that doesn't matter, accidents happen, and don't have to be worried about having to pay for replacing a device or anything like that. Yeah, there were a lot more things that we discussed about all the management pieces that need to happen on the back end, and Mike knows quite a bit more about that. But we had kind of done some research and came together as a team and found a way to make it happen, and it's a great thing for kids. So.
Okay, in our normal rotation, we purchased 200 iPads. We were going to put those out into the elementaries, and we were going to pull the old iPads in, wipe them, and then also put those back out, which would get us fairly close to classroom set for K through 2. With this opportunity came up, we felt this was a great time to jump in on it. Fortunately, Dr. Leck and Mrs. Olst were able to find some more money. We have ordered replacement 200-hour iPads that will come in hopefully soon, and we will get those out to replace into the elementary. In the meantime, the original ones that we were going to, that we pulled out, we will put back out in the elementaries. Our goal is by October to have everything out in classroom sets K through 2 with iPads, of course, depending on whether or not they can get here. We have already had in place a program, a mobile device manager called JAMP. We're just utilizing that and installing the software, pushing these iPads out. So it's a little stressful for me right now, but we're going to get it done. So yeah, basically the stock was already in hand. We hadn't done anything with it yet. So when these guys approached me with this iPad idea, I thought, yeah, we can make this work. We've ordered cases, we've ordered crayons and Apple pencils for teachers. So the students will be able to have styluses to write with on these iPads. Like I say, we're kind of excited about it. I'm just waiting for the cases to show up too. So, yeah. So other than short timing, shorting the K through 2, that's about the only drawback to it. But those have been ordered, so the replacements are on their way. We'll get them out as soon as we possibly can.
Any questions for either of them, or? No? Oh, Aaron?
So how many more devices are you managing this year versus last year? Approximately.
By the time the second order of iPads comes in, 600.
So do you see any issues with supporting those on an ongoing basis, and coupled with all the different software applications that are out there as well?
We're starting to get to the point where we're going to have to talk to Dr. Leck and Sally about some additional staff, but right now we're able to use the Google Management Suite, which covers those 1,700 Chromebooks. And then with this JAMP, I'm able to manage what will be 550 iPads.
And then what about when Pam leaves in December?
It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. Hopefully we'll be able to find someone who will pick up the communications part. That's my biggest concern, is that we don't lose anything on the web page communications part of it. I think office staff-wise, we can train. We find the right person with the right background and then train them into what we want them to be. So.
Any other questions for him? Jason?
And I should know this, but I don't. Is the goal of the district at some point to be 1-to-1 K-12?
With this last round of iPads with X200 coming in, we'll be a 1-to-1 K through 12. We're this close right now. 3 through 5 we're solid. It's just those iPads that I'm catching up on.
And we're talking one-to-one devices at the elementary, not necessarily the same one-to-one initiative at taking home, and we're talking about access. Right. Yeah.
So currently we're 3 through 12 with the exception of 6 or 8 have Chromebooks.
Any other questions for him? None? Okay, thanks for the report. Moving on to finance, general fund balance. Sally, you have any comments, or just there for your information?
No comment unless somebody has questions.
Okay. Moving on to monthly financials. Motion to approve. Motion by Greg, seconded by Diane. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, assuming roll call vote, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We added the C there, the review of the consolidation application. Is it just a review?
Consolidated application.
Sally?
Yeah, just to discuss, through the federal programs, it is an application process, on an online system. so the board, we bring it to the board for review. It is draft, with the timing of everything, it is draft. For the board, you can look at it. There's lots of information. It is just all the detail, what each school's plan is, the budgets of each building for Title I, the budgets for Title II, all the detail of, Schoology and Ingenuity, the professional development pieces that we pay for, the Title IV information, so it is pages and pages of information. I just want to highlight that if you want to, I did not put it out there. I just finished it today. It is in draft. So you are welcome to review it, or when it's finalized, I can email it to you or email it to you now. But just lots of information. It's all on the federal programs.
Any questions? Heidi?
Thank you for your detailed work on that.
Any other questions on that, or? None? Okay. Moving on to personnel. Can I have a motion to approve the hire of Steve Kapinski, 7th grade history teacher at the middle school, BA, salary of $48,387.08, prorated for 183 days for the 2021 school year upon successful background check? Motion by Gail, second by Aaron. Any discussion? Hearing none, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to letter B, is there a motion to approve the approval of the resignation of Pam Brown, Jamestown Public School Technology Department, on December 31st, 2020? Okay, Heidi?
So moved, and thank you, Pam, for your years of service to our district and your transition into new positions along the way.
Is there a second? Seconded by Gail. Any other discussion? Melissa?
Just a quick comment. I noticed when we were talking about it in the superintendent's report, you said you would be advertising in December. I'm just wondering if that's going to be advertised a little bit sooner, given the importance of those, with all the technology that's going to be happening this year.
Thank you. Probably more accurate to say would be advertising closer to December, is really what I meant to say, that we will certainly want to provide enough time as possible to recruit the half-time position and the full-time position. But, again, just a reminder that we're really looking at transitioning one spot into 1.5.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to letter C, do we want to have a motion to extend the leave first, whether that fails, or Rob?
I would just going to redirect you to your options that I put into your, by staff member here, into the superintendent's report. Just a reminder for those that are requesting, for those two that are requesting the leave of absence or the extended leave, you would have one of three options as a board. You could deny the request, and again, that would mean, well, person signed a contract, we're expecting them to come back and fulfill those contractual obligations. That's the first option you'd have. The second would be to approve that leave of absence. We would fill that position from within or externally, or leave those positions open. It really depends on the situation. And then that person would then have continuing contract rights in 2021 to a position in the district, not the same position, a position in the district. Or you approve the release from their contract and then fill the positions as I've outlined before, and you could always encourage those individuals to reapply for any open positions when it is appropriate for them to do so. So those are the three options I would have for you in this case for Ms. Schroeder.
The board's wish
Or
is
stand for questions if you have any.
Heidi?
I make a motion to release Ms. Schroeder from her contractual obligations. I do see that she did send a letter a little bit earlier, and I appreciate that earlier, but it still was August, and school started today, and so if she wishes to be released from her contract, I so move to
Okay.
release her from her contract.
There's a motion, seconded by Bob. Any discussion? Gail?
So does that mean we're not discussing the leave portion of that? We're moving right past that to releasing her from her contract?
Correct.
Am I clear?
Correct. Go ahead, Rob.
Just from a parliamentarian standpoint, you're making a motion so you can have discussion. You can always have the discussion and act on whatever motion, but you're making a motion, so the motion needs to be on the floor so you can have discussion.
Heidi?
I'd like just to add to my motion also, and to encourage them to reapply for any open positions in the fall, again, if that's something they're interested in.
Right. Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call. Sally? Oh, Gail?
Just for discussion standpoints, I feel like we have a lot of people who have health conditions in a bad situation. Many of those people didn't mean to have this extended this long for their decision-making. They were waiting to see what plans the district came up with if there would be mask requirements. A lot of different things didn't allow them to make decisions sooner, so I feel like maybe we should have discussed some of those things with the leave. I just feel like a lot of people are put in bad positions at this time. They couldn't make a decision really until they knew how their classrooms would look, if they would feel safe because of that, where COVID would be at this point. I think, with that, we have to just keep that in mind, that these are hard decisions for these people to make, and that, I can't imagine having to put my teaching career on the line for this. I'll get weepy thinking about it. Especially having worked with Ms. Schroeder. She's very dedicated and has worked very hard.
Any others? Jason?
So if I'm thinking about this correctly, regardless of if we look at the leave while the motion on the table is to release from contract versus a leave of absence, either way, we're going to have to find a replacement this semester, correct? So I would like us to discuss or encourage the board to look more closely at the leave versus out of the contract. I see it as we're going to have to replace either way. So I don't know if Dr. Leck had a...
I was just going to comment, I did put in my written report and maybe we deal with these as they come because they're all different. But with Ms. Schroeder, in visiting with Mr. Gaylor, his plan would be to offer extended contracts for at least for the first semester. In the second semester, look to make a semester-wide hire. For those that are aware with continuing contract laws, a certified position hired after January 1st would not have continuing contract rights, so you would not have to non-renew the person you hire in January. If there was somebody available, you would they would serve you for a semester, and then you could make that choice as what to do with the continuing contract for Ms. Schroeder. Does that make sense? Is that clear as mud?
Heidi?
I just like to echo what Gail said, Ms. Schroeder is, my children have thoroughly enjoyed her classes, and she's a fantastic teacher. However, teachers, school started today, and if she's not comfortable for whatever reason to be in the, and I have no doubt it's not a good reason, because she's an excellent teacher, but if she's not comfortable being in the classroom and being in school starting today, then I'm comfortable releasing her from her contract, so she's not obligated to show up this week, and probably showed up today, but this week or next week.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call. Sally?
Robert Hossel.
Yes.
Do you want to clarify what the motion is, just so everybody's aware what they're voting on?
The motion is to release from contract Rachel Schroeder, the history teacher at the high school, from the 2021 year school year.
Aaron Roberts? Greg Allen? Melissa Gleason? Diane Hansen? Yes? Yes. Roger Hout?
Yes.
Heidi Larson? Jason Rohr?
No, from the standpoint, I'd rather see her extended.
Gail Nelson? Motion passes 6-3.
Moving on to letter D. You want to touch on that, Rob? There you go.
Okay, this is a similar request. The first would be approval for an extended leave of absence, and then, or a release of contract. It is the same situation. This is Mrs. Edwards, Vanessa Edwards, a second grade teacher at Roosevelt Elementary. In this circumstance, we would look to open that position. Again, we don't have an opportunity for extended contracts in this kind of a situation. It's a classroom teacher. So we would need to look to open that position as soon as possible, and then assess the candidates that we receive internally and externally for that position. You would have the same three options that I provided for Ms. Schroeder.
Bob?
Just clarification, are we talking about Ms. Robinson or Mrs. Edwards? Okay,
Edwards.
okay.
Letter D. No? Melissa?
I would make a motion to approve the extended leave request for Vanessa Edwards.
Motion, there's a second. Seconded by Jason. Any discussion? Greg?
I'd be a little concerned about having two different approaches to very similar situations. I think that would be inconsistent, and I don't know that that would be a fair way to approach this. Either way, we're going to have to try to find a teacher, whether we extend it or not. But I think that, from my point of view, we need to remain as consistent as possible.
Bob?
The concern that I had here is, as I was reading it, is the line that Dr. Leck talked about. If we grant the leave of absence, the individual has a continuing contract, right? And that makes it a little more difficult to, if we're looking to recruit a teacher to fill this position, to tell them that it's just for 1 year. That could be a little awkward in recruitment. So, and I also agree with Mr. Allen about trying to be as consistent as we can. Although you have to deal with each case on a case-by-case basis, I'd be a little concerned about being consistent.
Any other discussion? Diane?
I'd like to offer up that there are probably several, if not more, teachers in the district that are uncomfortable coming back. And I don't know the personal history of these two particular teachers, but I imagine there are other teachers with underlying health problems that have major concerns. And to save the job for them and not for and have the others come back does not seem fair to me. And I am struggling with this because I understand the request, and I myself might be requesting that, but I'd like to speak for the other teachers that are coming back in an uncomfortable situation.
Any other discussion? Roll call, Sally?
Greg Allen? No. Melissa Gleason? No. Did you say no or yes? Yes. Diane Hansen?
No.
Roger Hout?
No.
Heidi Larson. Jason Rohr.
No.
Gail Nelson. Robert Toso. Aaron Roberts. No. Motion fails. 7-2.
Greg? A motion, is there a second? Seconded by Bob. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, Sally?
Melissa Gleason. Diane Hansen. Roger Hout.
Yes.
Heidi Larson. Jason Rohr.
Yes.
Gail Nelson. Robert Toso. Aaron Roberts. And Greg Allen. Motion passes 9-0.
Moving to letter E, is there a motion for the approval of the release of contract for Sarah Robinson, special education teacher for the 2021 school year? Motion by Jason. Seconded by Bob. Any discussion? Melissa?
I just want to make sure that this is a position that's going to be able to be filled, because I know special ed is very difficult to fill. And do we have somebody in line that could step into this already, or by allowing this, are we then leaving that position just open and those students are not going to have a teacher?
It's a great question. I think it's a fair one. We don't have anybody waiting in the wings. We struggle mightily to staff special education teachers. This is a position that was filled in May. May 18th, I think, is the date of board approval. We will struggle before the beginning of the year, and it might be one of those situations in which we make do. And that might be sharing of staff and trying to be as creative as possible with staffing plans, but it'll be a challenge. And I would envision a likelihood that the position maintains to be open for a period of time. And we just need to make do if released. That's a challenge.
Heidi?
I did think about these quite a bit when I read the requests, and I am in favor of approving a release simply because the reasons I stated before. If someone really isn't comfortable being there, and even though it is going to be a very difficult position to fill, and it was only filled for not even 90 days here, so it is going to, I still feel like if someone isn't comfortable being in that position, I always worry about then how do they function in that position if they don't want to be there? I guess that's, and aren't comfortable being there. And I understand people's reasons and concerns. They're people have very valid reasons and concerns, but I feel like that if they just don't feel like it's the place for them, I would want to let them be released and not force them to come to work.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call, Sally?
Diane Hansen. Roger Hout.
Yes.
Heidi Larson. Jason Rohr.
Yes.
Gail Nelson. Robert Toso. Aaron Roberts. Greg Allen. Melissa Gleason. Yes? Okay. Motion passes 9-0.
Moving into policy and procedures, is there a motion to rescind policy AAC, non-discrimination and anti-harassment policy? Motion by Gail, seconded by Heidi. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to letter B, is there a motion to approve the first reading of updated policy AAC, non-discrimination, anti-harassment policy, and with the subsequent one, can we add those together? Subsequent one, anti-discrimination harassment grievance process. Number two, the approval of the first reading of the Title IX sexual harassment grievance procedure, and then review of the discrimination harassment training requirements for employees, and review of the notice of the Title IX sexual harassment complaint. Heidi? Or Heidi. Sorry.
3 and 4 should not be included in that policy.
Okay, so it's B 1 and 2? Okay. Motion by Greg, seconded by Jason. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those.
If I can just make a comment.
Yep.
We did rescind the policy AAC, and just for those that are here or listening, we rescind a policy to replace it with an updated policy. There's substantial changes that's coming from the federal government related to changes in Title IX. So we have significant change. You'll notice that there is a couple different board regulations, the BR1 and BR2, and then there's exhibits 3 and 5. Essentially what that means is the other exhibits stay the same. You're just making changes to a handful of exhibits, and then the 2 board regulations and the policy, you're completely updating the AAC policy based on federal regulations and recent law change. It's a required policy.
Okay. Did we vote on that already? No. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to 3, is there a motion to review the discrimination harassment training requirements for employees, AAC E3? Motion by Bob. They're just review? Okay. So there's a review there for the harassment requirement, training requirements, and then also the sexual harassment complaint. Apologize for that. Moving to letter C, we have, I have some information on that. It was requested by a patron, Katrina Christensen, that the board replace the current board policy BFB, board staff relations, with a new policy that was lawful and in line with democratic ideals due to specific questions regarding constitutionality and various aspects of the policy. As noted in the initial request by Ms. Christensen, the request was written considering policy BDA, procedures for adopting board policy. To adequately inform the board on specific concerns related to the constitutionality and the intent of this policy, I reached out to Amy DeCoca, legal counsel for the North Dakota School Boards Association, and she informed me, quote, "The purpose of this policy is to set general expectations and clarify the roles and responsibilities of the board versus administration and the appropriate chain of command for communicating between staff, administration, the board. It also confirms that the board policy regarding complaints and grievances of staff will dictate how those issues are handled. It then sets forth a procedure for any other grievances that may not be covered by other specific policies. There is nothing in North Dakota law that prohibits this type of policy, nor is there a requirement, procedure, or process for communications between the board, communications between the board, administration, and staff. Rather, North Dakota law, North Dakota Century Code 15-1-09-33 grants school boards with board authority to establish and operate public schools and adopt policies like this in furtherance of that authority. Further, Mrs. DeCoca stated that multiple other board policies, as well as the negotiated agreement, addresses board and staff relations. These other policies and agreements also provide other avenues for staff to communicate with administration and the board about concerns and grievances. Lastly, she stated there's generally nothing improper and certainly not unconstitutional about prescribing a chain of command for employees, complaints, or grievances. So this leaves us the first step, of considering the request of BDA is to determine if the need exists. If the board does not believe a need exists to review and revise this policy, there is no further action necessary, and policy BFB will continue to be enforced. If the board, through board action, determines that the need exists, step 1, it needs to direct a policy statement to present it to the board. Step 2, as this policy references superintendent, the board should establish an ad hoc policy committee. Step 3, to review and revise the policy statement in the draft policy to be considered by the board. Step 4, and the board should follow current practices and BDA policy on policy adoption. So I will ask for any board action 3 times, and if no motion comes forward, then BFB policy will continue to be enforced as written. So is there any board action? Aaron?
Yeah, first time running through this one here. So what?
Yeah, me too.
I guess a parliamentary kind of a question here more so than anything
Okay.
at this point is, so there's a request from a patron on policy, and you have some review available that you just read. And so there's, what is the potential actions that we could take as a board to engage or disengage from this?
Rob, yeah.
Well, I think Mr. Hout talked about your options. The first option would be, he outlined the guidance he received from, and I don't know if you want to touch on that again, or people have questions specifically about that, but Amy DeCook, legal counsel for the North Dakota School Boards Association, reviewed the request specifically as it related to, is this a constitutional policy, or is it in line with democratic ideals, I think was the terminology that you referenced in your statement. Based on her feedback, she felt that it was certainly in line with what's allowable by North Dakota state law. So the options would be, if from a parliamentary standpoint, if you choose to do nothing as a board, that inaction is action. The inaction means you are happy with the policy as it's written. There are other procedures. If you feel like it should be reviewed, then you would need to first declare, I'm trying to think of your steps here, first declare that a need exists, and so then you would begin the process to refer that to another group to do that. You would have to install an ad hoc policy committee to review that policy and draft a policy statement that would come back to the board. So essentially, in a nutshell, if you're saying, we're happy with the policy, we think it's fine as it is, then you do nothing. If you feel like it should be reviewed, then you have to take the other steps that Mr. Hout outlined. Does that answer your question?
And for some of the new board members too, a while back, I mean, we've had a school board, the North Dakota School Board Association has been reviewing our policies and bringing them up to date. I mean, we've hired them to go through that process so that all of our policies are, up to date. And that's why we have so many policy reviews on our agenda all the time, so. Diane?
Well, also in the spirit of democratic ideals, I don't see anything wrong with reviewing a policy at a constituent's request. My concern is, how far down the road do we have to go in those 4 steps? You know, if we review it in step 1 and determine that it's okay after more discussion and a meeting or whatever, do we have to then form an ad hoc committee, and then we have to do the whole
thing.
Okay.
And then also, I mean, that's why I reached out to the legal counsel at the North Dakota School Board Association to review it. I don't think any of us are attorneys to know what is constitutionally right or legal in the state of North Dakota. Having them oversee this, I mean, that's why we do that too. Heidi, do you have a question?
I was just going to say thank you for reaching out and having the policy reviewed by the North Dakota School Boards Association legal counsel who does work on school board policies.
Yep. Aaron?
I was just going to suggest it. Do you think it would be helpful just to kind of describe some of the process that we use to adopt it for the benefit of the public on policy, on all of the steps that we do go through as a board?
So as Mr. Hout referenced, we have been part of the North Dakota School Board Association Policy Services. They outline specific required, recommended, and supplemental policies that we would choose to, or that we could choose to adopt as a school district. Based on their initial review, we're part of that policy services review, so they took our old policy book and made suggestions to update the policy book, and then we get a continual cycle of updated policies. The AAC policy, for example, was directed through School Boards Association and through the policy services to make sure that our policies are updated, that they've been legally vetted. And that's why I think the comments from Mr. Hout are important as well, to reaffirm that that's been vetted from a policy standpoint. We do a first reading. That's our opportunity to provide the policy out, not just to the board and make the board aware, but also to the public, and to bring awareness to what the board is choosing to do, is recommending or is suggesting in terms of a policy change or a new policy. Then it does not become policy until that second reading. So that's the process that is taken in terms of procedurally. Like I said, the other part of that is the legal vetting that occurs through the North Dakota School Boards Association and their policy services. So does that answer what you wanted? Okay.
Jason, do you have one first?
And we currently have a policy committee, correct, in the district?
No, that is not a policy committee. That's, I think, a different recommendation.
Coming up after this one. Okay. So, Diane?
Just so I can verbalize it and perhaps keep the public informed, the patron's concern is that grievances are not going in a chain of command that she would prefer, and are instead going straight to admin without a board review. Can you just put in layman's terms what the concern is?
That, she said, that it's unconstitutional. It's her opinion of how things flow.
Okay, so it's not the content necessarily.
I'm not sure where she's going as far as content or what, but it's, I looked at what her question was as far as unconstitutional or unlawful, and so, Rob, you have anything else to add?
Well, just going to add what you've already read there, and you probably would have to read it because I'm just listening to it, but the reference of, from the attorney was there are other mechanisms, and I'm not using the same verbiage that she did, but there's other mechanisms to address grievances. Those happen in the negotiated agreement. They happen by other policy, and this is a specific policy. It isn't. There's other discussions of chain of command and grievance procedures in the negotiated agreement and other policies that address that. And by our policy, and you can look at BFB. It's linked. It does reference that there are grievance procedures that are still in place. Let me read the verbiage specifically here. Give me a second. Nothing in this procedure shall be construed, in absence of board policy governing the grievance, all employee grievances shall be handled in accordance with board policy. And that's what I believe the attorney was referencing, that there is chain of command and there are other procedures and mechanisms to address grievances.
I would say you have to look at the whole book instead of a paragraph in the book, as far as, the chain of command and so on. Gail?
Just to clarify then, so we're talking about a grievance in particular, we're not talking about that teacher giving up their rights as just a patron to express
Concern.
general concerns that they
Yep.
have regarding their own children or et cetera. It's narrowly on the grievance
Policy.
process itself.
Correct.
Thank you for clarifying that.
So if there's no other discussion, I will just go through if there's any board action. If there is no board action, then that policy, Aaron?
I can definitely see some value in providing some clarification outside the grievance path to defining the chain of command within the communications and how things need to get escalated outside of grievances. So I move that we review this policy.
Melissa? Oh. So you're saying through board, I mean, that there needs to be a need to look at this policy, okay?
Yep.
Melissa seconded. Any other discussion? Bob?
All policies are reviewed at adoption, and I'd be a little concerned. We hire administrators to take care of issues. If we, as a board, would get overly involved in grievance procedures, we're going to be working full-time, because that's what we hire our administrators to do. So I'd be very careful about going down a road that would limit the authority that we give to administration within the district. That's just a piece of advice for what it's worth.
My opinion is that we have the legal counsel from North Dakota School Boards Association that are legal-minded people or attorneys that look at these policies and to see, and for us to say that we're looking at questioning their authority as attorneys, I mean, that just, doesn't make any sense to me, but any other discussion? Jason?
I mean, ever since I've been on the board, the big education for me has been governance. You know, what are our roles and responsibilities as board members? And I agree with the motion because I feel that this could be a good way for us to gauge how our governance paradigm is working. And I don't see this as a motion of the board outlining a grievance procedure. I see this as us just taking a look at the policy to make sure it's what we want at JPS. And so I don't really see this as a reason, not to do this. And I understand the concepts of our attorneys look at it and whatnot. But I just see this as a good opportunity for us to address a concern. And again, will this open up a can for everybody else, to look at each policy? I don't know. But that's why we would do this on a case-by-case basis.
Melissa?
I guess when we first did this policy, it was something that I had a little bit of a concern with, that it states that the superintendent is the person to go to, and there might be people who just might not feel comfortable with that. And I was assured that they could go to somebody else as well. But I think maybe the policy needs to actually outline that if they weren't comfortable going to the superintendent, what their other steps could be. That would be my only thing, is maybe just add a little bit. I like the policy as it is, except for maybe there needs to be just a little bit of added of where they could go if they didn't feel comfortable going to the superintendent with a grievance.
There are other options in, like the master agreement and so on, too. Greg?
Yeah, I think, what we're kind of maybe getting wrapped up in is maybe the full board doesn't fully understand all the policies that are associated with this. And there are the other avenue. If a person can't go to the superintendent, they go to the president of the board. All that's explained in other policies. And we're trying to pull this one policy out and see how this fits the whole thing, but it doesn't. If the board needs an education on the procedures and policies, and we can have that as an education to say, here are all those avenues. I guess I'm not sure why we would want to pull this one out and try to maybe adjust or make changes to that, because before you do that, you have to pull all of them out and fit the puzzle together. This is just one piece of it.
Heidi and Diane?
Greg, I think you make a good point. This is just overall arching policy. There are lots of procedures that are under this. I'm not sure how, I'm not sure how I would want it differently. I don't think you want information going everywhere. This is just sort of to streamline information. Our negotiated agreement goes into detail on all the other avenues. And I think, too, maybe we do need, put it on our list of board education to learn a little bit more if we're not familiar with all the other processes, including we have human resource processes as well on top of that. But I think this is a very general policy, and I think we're getting a little bit, and I think the initial request was it constitutional? That was the actual request, and I think we're going down some rabbit holes here. And again, it's an overarching policy that came from our School Boards Association. It was vetted. If there's some other procedural things that people have questions on or want to learn more about, I think that can be done in a much different manner than, usually when people have questions about policies, this policy hasn't been that old, but they will usually come and have questions during the process of it. And I think this policy passed with full board approval, if I remember correctly. And so I'm a little bit surprised that we're even trying to pick it apart more than for what it really is. So.
Diane?
I guess I see both sides of this very clearly, and I appreciate the discussion. I think perhaps the patron would just, not to put words in her mouth, but a discussion would be nice and healthy, and that's what we're doing. And I see Jason's point. Maybe we can use this as an opportunity to examine our process. I see Heidi's point that maybe we shouldn't. I do think that when Jason said, I don't know if we'll open a can of, that is a very good question, because I think we may be going down a rabbit hole. We may be opening a can of worms. Pandora's box has been released. I mean, this could go on. And I just, I think a healthy discussion is what this policy needs. And this process we would be forced into, in my opinion, is not worth the risk of what it might do in terms of damage. That is all.
Any other discussion? Melissa? And then Aaron?
I think one of the things that she wanted also was to make sure that we had a policy committee, which.
That's coming up next.
Okay,
so.
I was gonna say, I don't see it on here.
Yeah, it's part of the, this is the first part to get through, and then we go to the next part, so.
Okay, so that will be coming then.
Right after we're done with this.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you for the clarification.
Aaron?
Yeah, I guess as a part of the need to review, I guess from my perspective is I think there's room for improvement in just terms of clarity and how what this policy states versus what other policy states. There seems to be a stop point in here where there isn't in like the grievance, and so it can be confusing. And that's where I see the value in the discussion at a minimum. And I agree with Bob. There is no way I want to get involved with the day-to-day group, issues on administration and that we need to interject ourselves in that. There's no way I'm suggesting that. But I think there needs to be an avenue and a clear communication path and a clear escalation path. And I think reviewing this would be helpful.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call, Sally?
Jason Rohr.
Aye.
Gail Nelson. Robert Toso.
No.
Aaron Roberts.
Yes.
Greg Allen. Melissa Gleason. Did you say yes? Diane Hansen? No. Roger Hout?
No.
And Heidi Larson? No. Motion fails 5-4.
So then we, as far as moving into the next decision, I mean, the next one was referencing BDA, the standing committee that school no longer, a policy committee that we no longer utilize. The board should either consider a standing committee and direct the superintendent to revise it, but it looks like we're going down a road of having a committee. Correct, or?
Well, it's really up to the board. I think the process that the board has used in lack of a committee is to assign an ad hoc committee to address a specific issue. I think the question at hand is, do you want to have a standing policy committee, or do you want to continue to operate with an ad hoc committee that deals with, an ad hoc policy committee that would deal with policy reviews or these kinds of policy questions? If you do want to continue, you need to change your existing policy that states you'll have a standing policy committee. If you don't, you need to, or if you want to have a standing policy committee, you need to appoint one. So either you need to change your policy or change your practice.
Heidi?
I make a motion that, and I know we're working through our policies and getting through them here to update them all, but to not have a standing policy committee, because I see value in bringing policies to the full board and having a full discussion here.
So do you move that Superintendent craft and revise a policy that the board considers to be accurate reflects of the board governance or practice now? I'll read it one more time here. To direct the superintendent to craft a revised policy, BDA, for board consideration that accurately reflects board practice.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a motion? Is there a second? Seconded by Greg. Any discussion? Heidi?
The reason I bring this, because this is what has worked well, I feel, and I feel like it would be discussed anyway amongst the whole board. And so to take a committee to have a discussion and then bring it to the board to have a whole discussion, it may just be easier at time, more efficient, and also more in the public as well.
I agree with Heidi. I mean, every policy that's voted on, I mean, we don't have a policy committee, but I always looked at it as the entire board was the policy committee. It wasn't clarified as a policy committee, but the entire board heard everything on the policies. And so everything was brought here as regarding 4 policies, so. Rob?
Not to interject in board discussion here, but just for the sake of clarification, if we go down this road, I would craft a policy that states, in the event of a policy review, an ad hoc committee is established to address the policy request. Just so that would be my understanding of the intention.
Greg and then Bob.
I thought Bob was going to go first, sorry. Well, I mean, obviously, there's a question here regarding policy and understanding that. And I think through this, I mean, at some point, it should be, and like I said before, I don't know if it's a board education or an ad hoc committee, or something needs to happen to maybe address the concern here and the question that some of the other board members have about what is the procedure, what else is out there. I think that still needs to be addressed.
Yep. Rob?
So can I could address that just if we go through, and just maybe the group can tell me or the board can tell me if you feel like this would be appropriate or address the issue. If we did board education on chain of command, board education on the grievance procedure, what exists in place, is there other areas that you would like board education on? At least that for starters. Okay.
Any other discussion on the motion? Bob? Oh, sorry, Bob.
That's okay. I'm way down here in the back. I think one of the things that I appreciated, I think it was Mr. Hout that brought it up, was that this is the policy committee. And I would have a concern, for those that have been around for a long time, that probably means Mr. Allen and myself. We used to have a number of committees. And they met maybe at 7 o'clock in the morning, maybe at noon, and did, if you want to call it the grunt work, they did the deep dive if there was a policy. And then the full board would meet and just, I don't want to use the word rubber stamp, but basically just support the work of the committee. The problem with that is that when you're meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning or at noon with our committees, there was hardly ever any community involvement, hardly ever the press being there because the times just weren't convenient. And I would be concerned if we go down the road of getting back to committees to deal with items, that we lose that community involvement and the involvement of the press. And we're not as transparent, I guess is the word that I would look for. I'd be concerned about that. So let's just be cautious.
Melissa?
I'm sorry, I just need to clarify here and wrap my head around what we're doing here. So what we're saying, and I fully agree that the entire board should be voting on policy, but I think that needs to be clarified that the entire board is voting. So that's what we're saying now, is that
We've always done it that way.
that superintendent will be putting something together, stating that fact, or to clarify that?
Yep. Rob?
I think what the board is asking me to do, or at least that's the discussion, has been for me to revise policy BDA to accurately represent what the board does do, versus the board no longer has a standing policy committee. And so I would have to update the board or recommend a board policy to be approved that does represent what the intentions of the board are, that the board would, in a review, would establish an ad hoc committee to review the policy request, as opposed to referring it to a standing policy committee. You have one of two options. You either create the policy, or you create the policy committee to match your policy, or you change your policy to match your actions. They're both options that you have, that it's just what the board chooses to do. But if the board chooses to keep it as it is, then I have to recommend a change to your policy.
Any other discussion? Jason?
So if we continue to do what we've been doing, it would change the policy and what Dr. Leck writes up.
No, right now, we're asking, the motion on the table is to direct him to craft and revise policy BDA for board consideration to accurately reflect what we do now. Any other discussion? Hearing none. Oh, Diane?
I'm trying to get to the heart of this concern that drove all of this, and I think these healthy discussions are great. If nothing else, the silver lining for me personally is maybe patrons are seeing us appear to rubber stamp these policies because we don't have any discussion. We just say first, second, pass. So for me personally, I'm going to pay very close attention to every policy that comes before us, even though the State Board of Education and our lawyers have looked it over. They said it's perfectly fine. I'm going to, after this discussion, personally commit to really ferreting out this concern of this patron and figuring out how I can do better.
That is our job, Diane. That is our job. Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call. Sally? The motion is to direct the superintendent to craft and revise policy BDA for board consideration that accurately reflects board practice. Motion by Heidi and seconded by Greg.
You've got it down, I don't have it written down. Okay. Gail Nelson? Yes. Robert Toso? Yes. Aaron Roberts? Yes. Greg Allen? Yes. Melissa Gleason? Yes. Diane Hansen? Yes. Roger Hout?
Yes.
Heidi Larson? Yes. Jason Rohr.
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0.
Okay, moving on to tuition. We have nothing under tuition. Under other, we do have those things for the consent agenda that we need to vote on. Number one was the approval of open enrollment application for a first grade Pingree student to attend Jamestown Public School for the 21-20 school year. And then we also have the open enrollment application for a third and sixth grade Jamestown student to attend Pingree Buchanan school year for the 2021 year. Bob?
And on these issues, I would like to declare a conflict of interest and ask that I not
Yep.
vote or take part in discussion.
Yep. No, he doesn't, no. So we just accept his conflict, so. Gail? Oh, so there's a motion to approve those? Motion by Melissa, seconded by Greg. Any discussion?
That's all three?
All three of them, yep. Any other discussion? Hearing none, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The other one we moved out was C, the payment of bills. Their motion to pay the bills? Bob?
I'm sorry. Once again, I declare a conflict of interest
Yep.
and ask that I not be involved in the discussion or the vote.
Jason, you move? Motion by Jason, seconded by Gail. Any discussion? Hearing none, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Items for future agenda. I think we got a couple of them as far as procedures and stuff, policies and so on. If there is anything else that comes up that you want on the agenda, just let myself know or Rob email us and we'll get it on the agenda. Heidi?
The figure some, for the tour of the transition house when it's available, and if we have a board, however that might work, just so we can take a look at what's being done.
Okay. Hearing nothing else, we have meetings to be scheduled. We have new board orientation meeting. My screen just went the other way. On Tuesday, September 8th at 4 p.m. in the district conference office room. We have their next school board meeting on Tuesday, September 8th at 5:15 here in the Thompson Community Room. Labor Day is on Monday, so. And then Roman numeral 6, I just remind everybody to right-click on the monthly superintendent evaluation, and then also to right-click on our adjournment to assess our meeting. No further business. Meetings adjourned.